The news from New Delhi hit Washington, Brussels, and Tokyo like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through the corridors of power and the world's financial markets. India, once the cornerstone of the Indo-Pacific strategy and a vital link in global supply chains, had abruptly frozen major American technology and manufacturing projects, leaving investors and workers in limbo. Overnight, the certainty of a deep U.S. India partnership vanished, replaced by confusion and a sense of betrayal among diplomats and business leaders alike. This wasn't a quiet policy tweak. It was a public, unmistakable rebuke, broadcast live and dissected by analysts around the globe. The Modi government was willing to jeopardize its economic modernization to make a political point, signaling a new willingness to prioritize sovereignty over short-term growth. Projects meant to symbolize U.S.-India cooperation were now hostages in a new geopolitical standoff, their future uncertain and their symbolism transformed. Analysts were left speechless. The alliance's future was suddenly in doubt, and the world was left to wonder what would come next. For the U.S., India was more than a market. It was a crucial partner in managing China's rise and maintaining balance in Asia. Now that calculation is in question, forcing a fundamental reassessment of American foreign policy and its assumptions about global alliances. India's move signals a broader shift. Mid-tier powers are asserting their own interests, no longer content to choose between Washington and Beijing, but instead charting independent courses. The old rules are changing, and the U.S. must adapt or risk being left behind in a rapidly evolving world order. India's bold pivot is a clear sign of a new multipolar world, where power is more widely distributed and alliances are constantly shifting. The aftershocks are being felt in every major capital, as leaders scramble to understand the new reality and prepare for what comes next. Apple's expansion into India was supposed to be a masterstroke, diversifying away from China, reducing its dependence on a single manufacturing hub, and positioning itself for the next era of global growth. The plan was to tap into a vast, skilled workforce, benefit from lower costs, and deepen U.S.-India ties, all while fueling India's ambitions to become a global tech powerhouse. For Washington, every iPhone assembled in India was a win in the great power competition, a symbol of shifting alliances and economic resilience. But India's sudden freeze on permits and projects, including those for Apple's key partners, has turned this dream into a nightmare almost overnight. Billions in investments are now in limbo, production timelines shattered, and the future of Apple's India ambitions cast into doubt. Apple is caught in a political crossfire it never intended, forced to navigate a maze of shifting regulations and unpredictable government decisions. The risk is enormous. A prolonged freeze could poison Apple's prospects in a market of 1.4 billion people, erasing years of careful planning and investment. The vulnerability of even the world's most powerful corporations to geopolitics is now painfully clear, sending shockwaves through boardrooms worldwide. What was once a brilliant move now looks like a high-stakes gamble gone wrong, with consequences that could ripple far beyond Apple itself. The U.S.-India economic partnership, once hailed as a model for the future, is now a cautionary tale for multinational corporations everywhere. The fallout threatens not just Apple, but the entire American strategy in Asia, raising urgent questions about the risks of global expansion. The stakes have never been higher, and the world is watching to see what happens next. The roots of this crisis trace back to U.S. trade tariffs on Indian goods. What began as a seemingly technical economic measure would soon spiral into a defining moment for both nations. In Washington, these tariffs were seen as just another routine negotiating tactic, a way to extract concessions and protect American industries. But in New Delhi, the move landed differently. Indian leaders and the public saw them as a public humiliation, a direct affront to their nation's dignity on the world stage. For a rising power like India, being treated as a subordinate was intolerable. The sense of injustice ran deep, fueling a collective determination to push back. The Indian government felt its sovereignty was being disrespected, its aspirations for global leadership dismissed. The narrative quickly shifted. Suddenly it seemed the U.S. was treating India as a client state, not an equal partner. This perception stung, igniting a wave of indignation. This indignation galvanized a nationalistic response across party lines. Political rivals united, and ordinary citizens rallied behind the call for respect and reciprocity. Retaliating with tariffs wasn't enough. India needed to hit where it hurt most: strategic U.S. investments and high-profile American companies operating on Indian soil. By freezing projects like Apple's, India changed the game. It sent a clear message that it had leverage and wasn't afraid to use it to defend its interests. The message was unmistakable. Attack our economic interests, and we'll target your strategic ones. The stakes had been raised. This marks a profound shift in global power dynamics, as India asserts itself on the world stage and demands to be treated as an equal. The era of unquestioned American economic dominance is fading. The world is witnessing the rise of new powers with their own ambitions and strategies. Emerging powers like India now have their own ambitions and options, forging new alliances and partnerships beyond the traditional Western sphere. The Trump administration's tariffs, meant to project strength, instead exposed the limits of U.S. power and the risks of underestimating rising nations. Rather than bringing India to heel, these actions pushed it away, prompting a search for new partners and a more assertive foreign policy. Respect, not just economic might, now shapes 21st century alliances. Nations seek dignity and recognition, not just deals. The U.S. must rethink how it treats rising partners, or risk losing them to a new world order that values equality and mutual respect. The most alarming development for Washington? Quiet talks between New Delhi and Beijing. Once rivals, India and China are now exploring ways to counter U.S. economic pressure. They're discussing joint strategies and even new trade mechanisms outside the U.S. dollar system. A de-dollarized bloc led by the world's two most populous nations would shake the global order. The upcoming BRICS Plus summit will spotlight this new urgency. India, feeling spurned by the U.S., is taking a more assertive role in pushing for alternatives to Western dominance. An Indo-Chinese economic entente would be a strategic nightmare for Washington, undermining its Indo-Pacific strategy. If India finds more value in cooperation with Beijing, the balance of power in Asia shifts dramatically. The prospect of a united Eurasian economic front is no longer distant. It's emerging now. For Apple, the fallout is immediate. Supply chains disrupted, billions frozen, and production targets missed. The financial hit is severe, but the shockwaves go further. Every major U.S. tech company is now rethinking its India strategy. If Apple can be targeted, so can Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. Investment chills, expansion plans stall, and the political risk of operating in India skyrockets. The global innovation ecosystem, once seamless, now faces new barriers. India's move accelerates the splintering of the tech world into competing spheres. Innovation slows, costs rise, and digital nationalism takes hold. The China Plus One strategy is exposed as wishful thinking. There's no easy replacement for India's scale. Corporations are left scrambling for alternatives, but none match India's potential. The global supply chain, once efficient, is now a source of vulnerability. The tech world's future just became a lot more uncertain. The White House faces a dilemma: retaliate or recalibrate. Escalating tariffs or sanctions could backfire, pushing India closer to China and Russia. Instead of isolating India, the U.S. risks isolating itself. The most dangerous tool? Restricting visas for Indian tech talent, a move that would cripple Silicon Valley and trigger a brain drain. India knows this is America's Achilles heel. Every move risks backfiring, damaging the U.S. economy and its global goals. The old playbook of economic coercion no longer works against a power like India. Washington is trapped by its own strategy. Treating partners like pawns has consequences. Sometimes, they flip the board. The challenge now: find a way out before the damage is permanent. Listen to New Delhi. The tone is different now. No longer a junior partner, India speaks with the confidence of a great power. Officials openly call for a foreign policy free from any single nation's dictates. This isn't just a reaction to tariffs, it's a declaration of strategic independence. India's doctrine of strategic autonomy has evolved, from non-alignment to proactive global leadership. India is ready to shape the world order, not just balance it. Tactical alliances, even with U.S. rivals, are now on the table. India is building its own seat at the table, demanding respect for its growing might. This shift isn't about one leader, it's a national consensus. Across the country, there's a belief that India's moment has arrived. National pride fuels bold foreign policy moves. Standing up to the U.S. is seen as a necessary assertion of sovereignty. The era of India being taken for granted is over. This crisis is more than a trade dispute. It's a test of American global leadership. India has called Washington's bluff, exposing the limits of U.S. power in a multipolar world. The Trump administration faces a stark choice: escalate and risk losing India, or de-escalate and treat it as an equal. A permanent rupture would shift Asia's balance of power and cripple U.S. strategy. The cost of alienating India far outweighs any tariff gains. This could be remembered as a pivotal error, a self-inflicted wound. The world is watching. Can Washington adapt, or will it preside over the unraveling of its own alliances? The answer will define America's legacy in the 21st century.